Hey everybody, and welcome back to Be Like Christ. Thought I'd get a little bit wild and crazy today and teach standing up, like back in the old days. If you have not got a copy of the Luke notes for this whole study, you can get a copy on Amazon. There are links down in the description below, and also digital copies available on our website. We are picking up in verse 17, chapter 5, verse 17. The last section, we talked about Jesus healing the leper. Now Jesus is going to heal another man. All right, let's read this. 17 through 19. On one of those days, as he was teaching, Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting there, who had come from every village of Galilee and Judea and from Jerusalem, and the power of the Lord was with him to heal. And behold, some men were bringing on a bed a man who was paralyzed, and they were seeking to bring him in and to lay him before Jesus. But finding no way to bring him in because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and let him down with his bed through the tiles into the midst before Jesus. So the exact location of this miracle isn't mentioned in Luke's gospel, but we do have some hints in some of the other gospels. Matthew chapter 9 verse 1 says that Jesus had just crossed over and come to, quote, his own city. And Capernaum was considered Jesus' home. We know that from Mark chapter 2, verse 1. It says, and when he returned to Capernaum after some days, it was reported that he was home. So that was kind of his home base, and that seems to be where this miracle took place. So on this particular day, many of the Jewish leaders, scholars, had come to Galilee, which was probably, somewhat out of their way. Most of them were probably down in Jerusalem. So they had come up here to hear Jesus teach and to listen to what he had to say. There's a paralyzed man, a bedbound man, who was brought to this home where Jesus was at, and he was brought by several of his friends, four friends carrying him. They approached this house, but there were so many people around the house that they couldn't even get in to see Jesus. And Mark tells us that, quote, there was no more room, not even at the door. However, this was not going to keep them from accomplishing what they had come to do. So they actually took the bedbound man up on the roof, bed and all, and they began dismantling the roof so that they could lower the paralyzed man down to see Jesus. This might be kind of hard for like a modern reader like myself to understand, especially if you live in the West, like in the United States where I'm from, because we don't, there's a big difference between our roofs and their roofs. If you're going to send somebody down through a roof in the United States, like the home I grew up in, you got to go up there with some kind of like rickety ladder, right? How you would get a man up there who needed to be carried by four other people, I have no idea. You'd have to create some kind of suspension system or something, or get a scaffolding. And then you'd have to tear off all of the shingles and take your hacksaw and cut through the wood frame and then navigate through any electrical things that were up there, lighting situations, and go down through the drywall into the ceiling, right? If you did that in a modern home, that would be that would be a little ridiculous. Now, that's not exactly what they did here, because in the ancient world, the roofs of the houses were significantly different than what you might be thinking of in a Western home. They were usually made of a combination of either stone or earth, like earthen matter, or clay or mortar, and they were almost entirely flat. They might have had a little grate on them so that water could run off, but they were mostly flat. And they were used in a very functional way. So, we don't use our roofs for, at least the house that I was in growing up, like you don't use your roof for anything. You don't go on your roof for anything. Maybe if it has a leak or you have to fix something, or hang Christmas lights, but other than that, you're not going to use your roof. But it was different in the ancient days. The roof was considered a very functional part of the house. You might hang fruit up there to dry. You might sleep up there. Maybe, there would be a breeze up there. It might feel better than actually sleeping in your house. You could do chores or hang laundry, whatever. We actually read a story where this was happening in Acts chapter 10 with Peter when he was, around the time he was going to see Cornelius. He was actually using the roof for some of those purposes. So you got to kind of change your picture of what a roof might be, and at least what might come to mind first off. You can imagine the motion, or the commotion, even still, with this group of guys going up on the roof and starting to take it apart. That still doesn't sound like it was the most subtle process. and yet that's what they were doing. And there's all kinds of people surrounding this place, evidently, and they're all watching them. I kind of wonder if people looked at them and thought, like, oh, they're really rude. Here we are listening to this great teacher, and they're just like tearing the place apart trying to get through. I wonder if they had any judgmental eyes looking at them. And I imagine that they did. I imagine there were some people who were annoyed with them, thought that maybe they just should wait, or that what they were doing wasn't important enough to interrupt what was going on. Perhaps the homeowners were mad at them. This might have been Simon's house. Maybe Simon was mad at them. But they didn't care. These four guys and their paralyzed friend, they didn't care. They were going to do whatever it took to get to Jesus. And I think there is a good application in that, in that we shouldn't let anyone stop us from getting to the Jesus who is the only one who's going to be able to save us and to heal us. In this sense, it was a physical healing, but in our sense, it's a spiritual healing. At the same time, though, it might be a physical healing as well. Maybe you're tormented by something in this life, and the only way to have get a new body and a new life and a place without pain and suffering is in heaven, right? And we're dependent on Jesus for that. So whatever it is, spiritual healing especially, we need to do whatever it takes to get to Christ, no matter how many people look down on us, look at us out of the corner of their eye and judge us or mumble under their breath or think badly of us because of our zeal in getting to Jesus. Doesn't matter. So good application here. Another application. Do you think Jesus was what's the word? Yeah, interrupted by these guys coming through the roof? Do you think that he was like mid-sentence in like a really important teaching section, teaching on the new covenant, or what God wanted for the Jews in the future, oh man, these guys just came through the ceiling, started feeling dust falling on his head, and he's like, I didn't get to finish that section I really wanted to finish. Probably not. In fact, most definitely not. Jesus knew ahead of time that these guys were going to come down through the roof. And he knew exactly when the dust from the ceiling was going to start falling on his head. And I'm certain that Jesus had said all that he intended to say before the paralytic descended down to see him. Jesus had taught all of these people with his words, orally. Now he was going to teach them with his actions, with his miraculous power. Now, the application from that is that sometimes when we think that, or when something happens that we don't expect, sometimes we think that perhaps God's plan for our lives has been interrupted. That this thing, whatever it is, has gotten in the way, thrown it off course. But I don't think that we should think that way. God is never interrupted. God's never surprised or thrown off, because the only way to be surprised at something is to not know what's coming in the future. And God does know what's coming in the future. And so it's not as if his plans get interrupted. Our plans for our lives may be interrupted, but God's plan is most definitely on schedule. And sometimes we need to realize that God's timing might not necessarily align with our timing. You might ask why, right? I feel like sometimes I know what's best in my life, where I need to go, even when I'm trying to do God's will, right? I say, okay, this is what I need to be doing right now in order to make the biggest impact in the kingdom. And sometimes God says, no, that's that's not what you're going to be doing. You're going to be doing something completely different. And the interruptions to our plans sometimes come because perhaps God wants us to stay in a set of circumstances longer than maybe we want to stay, because he still has something to teach us in that. Or maybe he's humbling us through that, or building a talent through that. So he keeps us in circumstances. Perhaps we aren't allowed to stay in certain circumstances as long as we would like, because God has something new to teach us somewhere else. Have you ever just, wanted to kind of sit down, settle your life a little bit, get a little comfortable, and then something comes along that completely uproots you? Well, very likely, if you're pursuing God and drawing near to him, that wasn't something of random chance, and it wasn't an interruption. Maybe God had a reason for uprooting you because he has something to teach you. What appear as interruptions to us may be important parts of God's providential plan. I was going to kind of finish out the story today and do verses 20 through 26, but I think we're going to have to save that for next time because I think the video's running a little bit longer than I expected. So tomorrow we'll finish the story of the paralytic man. What happens now that he's at Jesus' feet? Is Jesus annoyed with him? Is he like, why'd you interrupt me? Why are you inconveniencing all these people by interrupting their sermon? Or is he a little bit happier to see the guy? I think it's probably going to be the latter, but we'll hold off on that until the next video. Again, notes for all the study are available on our website, tobelikechrist.com, and on Amazon. And there are also digital copies of the notes for the other studies that we've done. We've now done all 3 other Gospels. So those videos are online, and you can find them on the channel. I hope you guys have an excellent, fantabulous day, and I'll talk to you next time.